At dawn on June 4th, 1942, Japanese pilots scanning the gray Pacific horizon saw something impossible rising out of the sea. A full American aircraft carrier steaming into battle when it should have been resting at the bottom of the ocean. And in that moment, history bent, because the ship they were about to attack, USS Yorktown, had been officially written off just 3 days earlier, burned, broken, and leaking after the Battle of the Coral Sea, declared unfit for war, expected to need months of repairs, yet somehow, against logic and time itself, Yorktown had returned to fight at Midway in just 72 hours. And the story of how that happened is one of the most dramatic comebacks in naval warfare. A tale of exhaustion, courage, and the nation gambling everything on a wounded ship. Just weeks before Midway, Yorktown had been locked in combat in the Coral Sea, the first carrier versus carrier battle in history, and it was brutal, chaotic, and close, with aircraft screaming through clouds, torpedoes tearing through water, and bombs crashing into steel decks. And during that fight, Yorktown took a direct hit from a Japanese dive bomber that punched through her flight deck and exploded deep inside, ripping open compartments, killing sailors, starting fires, and flooding the ship, while shockwaves rattled the hull and fuel lines burst, spraying aviation gas that threatened to turn the carrier into a floating firestorm. Crews fought flames with hoses and bare hands, sealing bulkheads, dumping ammunition overboard, dragging the wounded through smoke so thick they could barely breathe. And when the smoke cleared, Yorktown was alive, but badly hurt. Her structure twisted, her deck scorched, her systems damaged, and her speed reduced. And when she limped back to Pearl Harbor on May 27th, she looked like a veteran already at the end of a long war, not a ship about to become the centerpiece of history. Normally, repairs like hers took months, sometimes longer, and dockyard estimates initially said Yorktown needed at least 3 months before she could sail again. But the Pacific Fleet was staring at something far worse than a damaged carrier, because American codebreakers had uncovered Japanese plans for a massive strike on Midway, a trap designed to lure out and destroy what remained of the U.S. carrier force. And Admiral Chester Nimitz knew he would face 4 Japanese fleet carriers with only 3 American ones if Yorktown stayed sidelined. And losing that numerical balance could mean disaster. So Nimitz made a decision that shocked engineers and officers alike. Yorktown would be patched, not repaired, rebuilt just enough to fight, and she would sail in 3 days. At Pearl Harbor, the docks exploded into motion as over 1,400 workers flooded the carrier, welding, hammering, rewiring, pumping out water, replacing smashed plating, fixing elevators, sealing cracks, and clearing debris non-stop under floodlights, while sailors who should have been resting after Coral Sea instead joined repair crews, working shoulder to shoulder with civilians, barely sleeping, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and the knowledge that the fate of the Pacific might depend on how fast their hands could move. Damaged radar sets were jerry-rigged, electrical lines were rerouted, pumps were patched, and holes were welded closed, while paint barely had time to dry. And when something couldn't be fully fixed, it was simply bypassed because perfection was impossible and speed was everything. Entire sections of Yorktown were still warped. Some compartments still smelled of smoke and burned metal, but she could launch aircraft, steer, and fight, and that was enough. 72 hours after arriving at Pearl Harbor, Yorktown slipped back into the ocean, her crew still sore, still grieving lost friends from Coral Sea, but now staring into another battle that could decide the war. As Yorktown raced toward Midway with Task Force 17, her presence alone reshaped the coming fight, because Japanese commanders believed they had sunk 2 American carriers at Coral Sea, not knowing Yorktown had survived, and they expected only 2 U.S. carriers at Midway, Enterprise and Hornet. But Yorktown's ghostly reappearance would tilt the odds and confuse Japanese strike planning. On the morning of June 4th, as the sun climbed over the Pacific, Yorktown's radar operators picked up incoming aircraft, and soon the sky filled with Japanese dive bombers from the carrier Hiryu. their engines screaming as they plunged toward the wounded ship that should not have been there. Yorktown's anti-aircraft guns erupted, black flak bursts surrounding the attackers, tracers slicing through clouds, and sailors watched bombs fall like dark stars, growing larger by the second, until one smashed into the flight deck, exploding through steel and detonating below, killing crewmen instantly and blowing apart compartments. Another bomb struck near the stack, starting fires and ripping open fuel lines, and in seconds, Yorktown was again choking in smoke, flames rolling across the deck, aircraft burning, debris scattered everywhere. But her crew did not panic because they had already faced death days earlier, and they went to work with mechanical discipline, sealing bulkheads, fighting fires, jettisoning damaged planes, restoring power line by line. Against all odds, within an hour, Yorktown was operational again, launching fighters as if nothing had happened. And when Japanese pilots circled back later expecting to finish her off, they were stunned to see the same carrier still moving, still alive. And that confusion mattered because they believed they were attacking different ships, misjudging how many carriers the Americans truly had. Then came the torpedoes. Later that day, Japanese torpedo bombers roared low over the waves and raced toward Yorktown, and this time there was no escaping, because at least 2 torpedoes slammed into her port side, shaking the ship violently, flooding boiler rooms, killing power, and stopping her dead in the water. Yorktown listed sharply, her lights went out, her engines went silent, and for a moment it seemed the miracle had finally ended. Captain Elliot Buckmaster ordered abandoned ship, and sailors climbed down ropes into the ocean, watching their carrier tilt and smoke drift into the sky, and many believed she was finally lost. But Yorktown refused to die. Damage control teams reboarded her, pumping water, sealing ruptures, restoring partial power, and slowly, painfully, the list decreased. By late afternoon, she was stabilized again, floating, wounded but alive, even after taking bomb and torpedo hits in the same day. Yet fate had one last test. On June 6, while being towed back toward Pearl Harbor, Japanese submarine 168 slipped through the American screen and fired a spread of torpedoes, 2 of which struck Yorktown and 1 hit the destroyer Hammond beside her, exploding the escort and sending shockwaves through the carrier. The final damage was too much, and on June 7th, USS Yorktown rolled and slipped beneath the waves, disappearing into the Pacific after one last fight. But her sinking was not the end of her story, because by appearing at Midway when she was supposed to be dead, Yorktown changed the battle, and Midway itself changed the war. While Yorktown absorbed punishment, American dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown found the Japanese carriers at the worst possible moment, decks crowded with fueled aircraft and munitions, and in minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were burning wrecks, later joined by Hiryu, shattered by return strikes, and Japan lost 4 fleet carriers in a single day, a blow from which it would never fully recover. The Pacific War did not end at Midway, but its direction shifted forever, and Yorktown's 72-hour resurrection helped make that shift possible. What makes Yorktown's story so powerful is not just the steel and fire, but the human endurance behind it, the sailors who barely slept, the engineers who ignored normal limits, the commanders who gambled everything on a damaged hull, and the crew who walked back onto a ship that had already nearly killed them, knowing it might finish the job. They didn't believe Yorktown was invincible. They believed she was necessary, and necessity can push people past timelines, fear, and reason. In naval warfare, carriers are symbols of national power, but in Yorktown's case, she became something more, a living contradiction to enemy expectations, a floating reminder that war does not always obey statistics or repair schedules. Japanese planners built their Midway operation assuming Yorktown was gone, assuming American strength was weaker than it really was, and that assumption cracked open their strategy because Yorktown's presence forced more attacks, drew more bombs, soaked more torpedoes, and bought time for American pilots to strike back. In a strange way, Yorktown's survival at Pearl Harbor for those 3 frantic days was as important as any bomb dropped at Midway itself, because without her, the balance would have shifted, the skies would have been different, and the outcome might not have been the same. Long after she slipped beneath the sea, Yorktown's legend only grew, and when her wreck was discovered decades later resting upright in the deep Pacific, her name returned to history not as a victim, but as a symbol of defiance. She had been written off, underestimated, rushed, patched, and sent back into hell, and instead of collapsing, she helped collapse an empire's momentum. War is often told through massive armies and famous generals, but sometimes it turns on quieter miracles, on welders working through the night, sailors gripping hoses in smoke, officers trusting damaged machines, and a ship that refuses to accept the timeline assigned to it. USS Yorktown was supposed to be dead, a casualty of Coral Sea, a footnote before Midway even began. Yet in 72 impossible hours, she returned to the center of history, sailed into fire, absorbed the enemy's fury, and gave the United States the breathing room it needed to change the Pacific War forever. And that is why when Japanese pilots squinted at the horizon that morning and saw a carrier that shouldn't exist, they were not just seeing steel and smoke. They were seeing the moment when fate itself showed up late, wounded and absolutely unwilling to quit.